Yo, how's it going, guys? I'm back in the workshop today and I've got another old retro GT and my plan is to rebuild it into a bit of a rat bike slash commuter. I want something with a front rack, rigid forks and a nice simple drivetrain that's going to be nice and reliable and relatively inexpensive. So the bike is a 1993 GT Ricochet. I picked this up over a year ago for around 20 or 30 New Zealand dollars. It looks like it hasn't been ridden in a really long time. The bike looks to be almost completely original from what I can see. There is a fair bit of rust and corrosion, some crusty old tyres. It's got this nasty old derailleur guard that's upside down for some reason, and it looks like the skewer has somehow bent, sitting at a pretty bad angle. Shifter and cables all gunked up and seized. Bottom bracket bearings are definitely gone. Front wheel's loose, and so is the rear. But yeah, there's quite a few years of neglect on this old thing. But underneath all the crud, I think there's definitely some life left in it. So moving on, these are all the parts that I've collected for this build. I wanted to try reuse as much as I could, but some of these parts I just had to be replaced, and I've gone for mainly second-hand parts. So starting off, I've got this 39 tooth BMX chainring. It's 110 BCD, so will hopefully fit on the original cranks quite nicely. 7-speed cassette. It is used, but still has plenty of life left in it. Shimano 8-speed shifter. I couldn't find a 7-speed, and an 8-speed shifter has the same pull ratio, so will work fine with a 7-speed. There'll just be one kind of ghost gear. Got some Shimano skewers to replace the old rusty bent ones. I got these pretty rad MKS Lambda pedals that I'm pretty keen to try out. They look pretty cool. I got this scuffed up old titanium Flite Saddle. This one actually came on an old beaten up bike that I got for pretty cheap. I love these old Flites. Some Vans Colt grips. I got this Haro BMX top load stem. It is a bit beaten up, but should hopefully do the trick. Some Avid 25 V-brakes, and some Avid speed dial levers. These are actually really cool. You can adjust the pull ratio on them to work with pretty much any brake. Some new V-brake pads, and for the bars I've gone for these 11 race BMX bars. I thought they had quite a nice bit of rise, and they should hopefully give the bike a nice kind of cruisy BMX vibe. I found this old top cap in my parts bin that I thought would match quite nicely. It's a pretty faded old GT one. And for the front rack, I've got this nice Soma one. This one again came off a bike I bought just for parts, so I'm stoked to finally be putting it to use. For the basket, it took me a little while to find this one. A lot of the other options are quite expensive or just kind of weirdly sized. So yeah, I found this one at Mitre 10, which is a local hardware store. It's the 10-litre version, which I thought was a nice size for this setup. It's made from recycled plastic, which is pretty cool, and it was also only $8. Now for the fork, I've gone for this rigid GT one, and the main reason I chose this one was because it has front eyelet mounts, which should hopefully work perfectly with the rack. This model was made by Spinner, which I think used to make a lot of the rigid forks for the big bike companies back in the 90s. And what's kind of cool about this one is it's actually stamped 1993, which is the same year as the frame. So I think it was, yeah, kind of meant to be. I do like the paint job, it's pretty wild, but I'm just not sure how it's going to match up with the frame, but I guess we'll find out. And for the tyres, I've gone for my trusty favourite, which is the Maxxis Holy Roller in 2.4. I love these tyres. And here's what the front rack slash basket combo will look like. I'm pretty excited about this build, so let's start off by stripping the whole thing down. Well, I was kind of expecting a bit more of a battle with the cranks, but this thing just came off without any effort. Pretty nice. It's always the bottom bracket. Here's just a little tip that I do when trying to loosen off stiff bottom brackets. I just pop the frame out of the stand and put it on the ground. This way you can just get a bit more weight onto it without overstressing the work stand or your elbow. It works out most of the time for me. Yep, look at that. That's about 30 odd years of rusty, dusty flakes. That'll definitely need a good clean. It's starting to make a bit of a rust spot on the ground. Damn. Look, there's even more now. That's a pretty big chunk. Hopefully that wasn't part of the frame. So there we are, the bike's all stripped down now. There's actually quite a bit of rust spiders all over the frame, and it looks like this bottle cage and pump mount has unfortunately scuffed this decal quite a bit, which is a bit of a shame. And this is actually a pretty cool feature on these old frames. Some of these old GTs have this kind of channel that runs underneath the top tube, and it hides the cables quite nicely. So I'm going to start off now by removing as much of this crud from the bottom bracket shell as I can, and then I'll move on to rust treating the frame. Now that's quite a bit of gunk. So I'm going to start off now by giving the frame a bit of a wipe down with muck off, just get rid of all the grease and grime. So it's all cleaned up pretty nicely. Now I'm going to move on to the rust. So my plan is to scrape off the paint around the more major rust bubbles, and this is so the rust and metal will be exposed. I'll go around the whole frame, and then my plan is to use some rust converter to stop it from spreading and getting worse. So I'm going to experiment with these two here. First off is this CRC rust converter. It says here that it neutralizes the rust and turns it into a black primer, which seems pretty interesting. And this other stuff that I have is this Vapor Rust. It's a slightly different product, but instead of converting it, it removes it. I've used this stuff on nuts and bolts before and it's worked out pretty well. So I'm going to test them both out on these two spots here. This first stuff is the vapor rust that I'll do on the right side. And then this is the rust converter on the left side. So I'll leave this now and then I'll come back in about half an hour. Alright, so it's been about 30 minutes and it looks like the rust converter has done what it said it was. It's pretty interesting how black it's gone. It actually started going black pretty quickly within like the first minute or two. It doesn't look like the vapor rust has actually done much, so I'm just going to use the rust converter on the rest of the frame and see how we go. So while I wait for the rust converter to do its thing, I might as well start up by cleaning the rest of the parts that I'll be saving. So the cranks are Shimano Altus, they're 175 length and they're 110 BCD. It looks like the chainring fits quite nicely, which is pretty sweet. So I'm going to try clean them up a bit and remove a bit of the corrosion. I'm not going to go for a mirror finish or anything like that, I just want to bring a little bit more shine back. So I've just finished the left hand crank and here's a little comparison. It was just about 10 minutes of sanding and polishing. And that's both of them done now. Pretty happy with how they've turned out. Now onto the derailleur. It's a Shimano X-Age, pretty crusty with a bit of rust on the chrome. Let's give it a clean and see how we go. So I'm just using a brass wire brush here on the chrome. It's not perfect, but it's done a pretty damn good job. All done on that now, so pretty happy. Now onto the seat post. So the same thing here, just going to give it a bit of a clean and a polish. So I'm just going to be using that rust converter on the clamp part as it is a bit rusty. And there we go. Again, not perfect, but we've removed pretty much all of the rust, so we'll move on to the headset now. So the bearings have cleaned up pretty nicely. This race actually has a Tange stamp on it, which is pretty cool. It's the same make as the tubing of the frame. So now moving on to the wheels. Gonna start off by trying to remove the skewer. Just need to give it a bit of a bend and yeah, there we go. This cassette is pretty stuck on here, so it's time for some leverage. These hubs definitely need a bit of a service, rims need a good clean, and so do the hubs. So I'm just going to start using some of that Autosol metal polish to tidy up the rims, and onto the hubs too. So the rims cleaned up pretty nicely, and so did the hubs. Now it's just time to service these bearings. So I've got all the old grease out and cleaned it out and got some new stuff in there. We'll pop the axle back in and see how they feel. So I'm pretty happy with how the rear wheel has turned out. The bearings are nice and smooth again and the rim's looking a lot shinier. And here's a little comparison to see the difference. So I've just finished the front wheel now and I'm pretty happy. 2 Revive wheels ready for the build. So now moving back to the frame, it looks like the rust converter has done its trick. So now I'm just going to go over the frame with a bit of cut and polish, and this is going to put a little bit of life back into the paint, and it's also going to add a nice layer of protection. polishing is all done now. It might be kind of hard to see, but the paint feels really smooth now. It's definitely added a new shine to it. I also rust converted the inside of the BB shell, so hopefully that stops it from getting any worse. Just going to give the fork a little bit of a polish as well. These 90s paint jobs are just so rad, man. So I'm just going to remove a few of these stickers and then we can start the build. So I'm going to test out this 110mm BB. It's a little bit narrower than the original, but seeing as I'm only using a 1x chainring, I'm hoping that it will work. So I've just done a test fit and it is looking good. Okay, well yeah, that's not good. So it looks like the crank is actually hitting the bottom bracket cup and it's not even fully tight yet. So I guess I'm gonna have to try find a wider BB. Yeah, I was just removing that BB and the cup has snapped in half. Yeah, not a big fan of these plastic cups. What's your guys' thoughts? Gonna have to try get this thing out now. Alright, so I finally got that BB out and I've found a slightly wider 113mm. I'm hoping this is going to work. It doesn't look like it's going to have that same issue, so let's chuck it on and see. Alright, good news guys, it's worked out perfectly. Nothing's rubbing and I'm pretty happy with that clearance. Alright, so the build's starting to take a bit of shape now. The tire clearance is good. It's definitely giving me that big BMX vibes for sure, and the fork color is growing on me a little bit. Would have been so sick if that fork was red to match those decals, but anyway, let's keep going with the build. So my plan with the rack is to drill some holes and just use zip ties to tie it down. I know that zip ties aren't the strongest solution, but I'm keen to test it out and just see how they go. And because this crate isn't really designed for this, it doesn't have any pre-drilled holes or anything, so riding in the rain it would just fill up. So hopefully these holes I'm going to drill will act as a drain. So I've just marked them all up now, hopefully it's all centered. And I'm going to be using 7 zip ties in total, so 4 along vertically and then 3 horizontally to stop it from sliding front and back. So all was going well until I realized that the crate actually covers the bolt heads, so I can't really tighten or loosen them to adjust the rack. Didn't really think that one through. I could drill some holes to access them, I suppose, but anyway, I'm just going to cut these zip ties off and just adjust it. Alright, so I'm pretty happy with how the level is. I've tightened up all the bolts now so I can zip tie it back down. I have to think of a better solution for the adjustments in the future, but I'll just do this for now. Alright, so I'm back at this funny situation that I've been at before. This is actually the same setup as the GT Karakoram that I built for my brother. The cable guides on this frame are designed for canties, so there's no actual housing stop at the rear here. So I'm just going to set it up the same as I did on the Karakoram, as it ended up working quite well. This little guide here is metal, so when the cable goes through it, it will be metal on metal. So I'm just going to use a little bit of plastic tubing through here just to stop that friction. Much better. I think if it was sitting a little bit straighter, it would be a bit better. I guess you could just zip tie it, which would help, but I'm just going to leave it like this at the moment as it does feel pretty solid. If any of you guys have any good solutions or tips, please let me know. So the shifter worked out quite well in the end. It shifts all 7 really nicely, and I just left that kind of ghost gear at the end, so you can't actually get that final click on the lever as the limit screw is stopping the derailleur from moving any further. And there we go, guys. There was definitely a few ups and downs on this build, but we got there in the end. Pretty damn stoked how this one's turned out. The basket seems pretty solid and the bars look super comfy. The drivetrain cleaned up pretty nicely too. I may do some final little adjustments on the rack and bar angles, but overall I'm pretty damn happy. For anyone interested in the build cost, it cost me a roughly 200 NZD, so about 120 USD. A few parts did come from the parts bin, but I'll leave a little cost breakdown in the description below. Let me know what you guys think of this one. This should hopefully be a pretty ideal commuter for me. I haven't actually commuted on 26" before, so it should be pretty interesting to see how I go. I may just need to add some mudguards for the winter. But anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully some of you found this interesting and useful. I'm going to go test this thing out now. So I'll catch you all next time. Peace.
Thank you.